you today. This is our focus. What's at stake? Exploring the legacy of Black resistance in DC and the powerful legacy of Black folk fighting against state violence, engaging in community defense and self-determination. And I love that we heard from DC's favorite son, Marvin Gaye, earlier today, because he was Black resistance and he was celebrating Black excellence. And not only did he make DC proud, he made the nation proud. And so I think that's a very good backdrop for our discussion for today. I'd like to invite our esteemed panel down to join me, and then we'll do introductions, and we're going to dive right into what is expected to be a really engaging conversation. So first, to join us, Nkechi Taifa. Let's give her a round of applause. Give it up.
Okay. Sorry.
Jamila White. Let's give it up for Miss White. Afeni Evans. And April Goggins.
Right. Say a little wobbly.
They're all good in theory. You gotta really just focus. No wobbling around. They're good in theory. They look good. You got to have a solid footing when you're on these high stools. Well, how's everybody feeling? Don't they look lovely? Yeah. Don't they look beautiful? And can we all just take a moment to appreciate Afeni's shoes? And this weather. I mean, girl did not come to play. She's like, oh, I'm sitting on a panel. You will see my whole outfit.
Always, yes.
Gorgeous.
Got it.
So, as she should, absolutely. So I want to introduce myself more personally. I'm a first generation Cape Verdean American, Cape Verde, African island nation on the West Coast. I was born in Massachusetts, but I call DC home. Yes. I may be a transplant, but I like to say I am raising 3 DC natives. Hey. Are all DC public school students. I've been at Channel 9 for about 13 years this summer, and that's about just as long as I've lived in Ward 7. And my kids have been educated east of the river. Hey. The whole time. So I am proud to look around this room and see so many folks that I love, so many folks that I admire who are doing the work in the community. And I respect all of you, and I really want you to be engaged, lean in on this conversation. This is a discussion. So we're going to start out with this wonderful panel, but we're going to have a little bit of Q&A at the end. So I want you to keep in mind any questions that you may have, jot them down, keep them in mind. Remember, this is a two-way conversation, so we want everyone engaged. So with my introduction, let's start with April. If you can introduce yourselves, and we'll go down the line.
Okay, is my little mic on?
Loud and clear.
Okay. I got my little organized voice on. I'm April Goggins. I am BLM core organizer. I am a transplant. I was born and raised in Colorado, but I've been here. It'll be 17 years. This year, always in Anacostia, Southeast. I raised not a native Washingtonian, but she's been through all of DCPS. And I don't know what else we're saying. I'm just excited. I'm overwhelmed. I'm very overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed by who's here. I'm overwhelmed that we're sitting here. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Afeni.
Hi, my name is Afeni. I'm really grateful to be here. Grateful to be here with all of you. I'm a lead organizer with the DC Safety Squad. I'm also a community organizer with Life After Leave. And you know, where am I from? I'm an Army brat, so that's a big question. So I was born in Germany. I've been all around the country, and I've been in DC for the past 2 years. I started my organizing journey in 2020 with the uprising of George Floyd, and I fell in love with the city and I stayed here. So yeah, I'm just really excited to be here. Really grateful to be in community.
And Mr. Mayor.
Good morning. Is it morning or afternoon?
Afternoon.
Happy Black History Month, everybody. But every Saturday is Black Saturday where I'm from. I'm so happy to be joining you all. I am Jamila White. I'm the daughter of Jacqueline White, who's sitting right over there. Thank you, Mama, for being here. I'm from the DMV. My father moved to DC in 1990. He moved to Southeast over in Barney Circle, if y'all know what that is, DC General. My parents did decide that was best for our lives for them to live apart. So I grew up between Southeast and Fredericksburg, DC, where my mom lives. I am an ANC commissioner for 8A05. That's the Anacostia community. This is my second term, and I'm also one of the co-founders and co-owners of Blackwoody. We are Black Love and Liberation Social Impact Cooperative, and since age of 19, I've dedicated my life to Black love and liberation, because when I was 19, my mom and my grandmother sent me to Africa, to Senegal to be exact, to learn about French. And there I learned about myself. I saw absolute beauty and poverty for the first time and realized it looked like me, the same as in DC, and that this had to be something systemic and worldwide to keep Black people in poverty. So just had a wonderful career. Happy to be with these Black women for Black History Month, and happy be with all you all. So looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you very much, Jamila. And Kichi.
Yeah, greetings everyone. I'm Nikaifa. I am a native.
Yeah.
5 months after Emmett Till was brutally murdered down there in Mississippi and thrown in the bottom of the Tallahatchie River. I was in kindergarten when Fannie Lou Hamer was beaten to within an inch of her life just for trying to register to vote. I am the director of the, I'm the founder and president of Tayub LLC, director of the Reparation Education Project. Today is Reparations Education Day, so shout out to that. I'm an attorney. I wrote a memoir called Black Power, Black Lawyer, My Audacious Quest for Justice. And my latest book that just came out is Reparations on Fire, How and Why It's Spreading Across America. I also was chair and commissioner of the DC Commission on Human Rights. And I've worked for the Open Society Foundations, the ACLU, the National Prison Project, the Women's Legal Defense Fund, Howard University School of Law. And I was an attorney in private practice, and I've been involved in just about any and everything. Thank you.
Give it up for these amazing women. I'm gonna slide this over, give that to you. All right. So now we have all the pleasantries and introductions taken care of. I'm very impressed, by the way, with this panel. Let's start with April. Kick us off, dive right in. So let's talk about, like, set the scene, why we're here, why it's important to have this discussion about the legacy of Black resistance in the district.
Yeah, for us, this was a moment of highlighting both the importance of walking in now, which is where a lot of people's focus is, but DC as kind of the epicenter of Black resistance in so many areas. And I kind of got obsessed with the history of DC just because I'm so inundated with things from everywhere else. And one of the things that I first learned about here was specifically the importance of highlighting things that are DC, things that are like Native Washingtonians. And that's everything from buildings and spaces, but starts with the people. And so when I started looking, there's this entire, this like rich history of exactly what we're doing now. When I started looking at the history, what I saw was some of the same sentiments, well, a lot of the exact same sentiments, even some of the direct actions that we've done were done then, from starting from 1919 during the Red Summer all the way to 1941. And you can see our wonderful history exhibit in the crystal room that outlines a lot of that. But I believe that that kind of resistance stays in the soil, right? I believe that that is what we walk on. I believe that connecting the past to now grounds us in exactly where we are. It helped me not be as frustrated when folks are killed by police here and there's not an outrage like there is around the country. That isn't because it doesn't matter. It's because the machine of blacking everything out here in the ways in which the state is, violent to people But DC has an incredible history of resilience and resistance, from armed resistance to resistance with their bodies, at all ages. There's children, the children were marching, walking out of school in the 50s. So that's my, for me, it was really important to ground the work that we do in DC, and the DC that people live in DC.
Thank you. Thank you for that. This is a question for the whole panel. What are your initial thoughts on the impact report? We're all here because we released this first ever impact report. And I do encourage all of you to take a look at some of the amazing work. Once you see it in black and white, the amazing work that these folks are doing on the grounds, you realize the impact that they have had in DC and around the world. And you're making an impact in so many communities. So the question is, what are your initial thoughts on the impact report? And were you surprised by anything? So let's start with Nkechi and we'll go down the line.
Well, let me just tell you, it was awe-inspiring looking at that report. I have not gone through every single page and all like that, but just a cursory review just shows the breadth and the depth of what this organization has been involved in. And I say it is absolutely awesome. And when April talked about the history, oh my God, there was so much in there that I did not even know. I'm a native Washingtonian, excuse me, Mike. Okay. Growing up here, we didn't learn all of that in school, and particularly, that early history. So thank you so very much for that. Was I surprised? I wouldn't say I was surprised or anything. I just was going to see things in black and white, issues dealing with accountability. So very critical and important. It's like, I'm kind of on the outskirts of things, kind of things are going on, you don't quite know it. So it really helped to put things more clearly to me as to what's going on locally, nationally, and globally as well. So thank you for this contribution.
Right. Jamila.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to go through the whole impact, but I feel like my community is the impact. There's so much that Black Lives Matter DC does at the very grassroots, hyper local level that no one knows about.
Yeah.
And over the course of the last 3 years, am I allowed to say how much?
Yeah.
I know Black Lives Matter and sent my cash out at least $30,000, where that has gone directly to families who've experienced violence and have been victims of violence, and not necessarily violence from the police. We know that poverty is violence. Coretta Scott King told us right here in Washington, D.C. 60 years ago after her husband's death, that poverty is violence. Not investing in public education is violence. Taking a mother from a child is violence. And we have the most state-sanctioned violence in all of America, because guess what? We don't have statehood, so everything starts here. Congress plays with us like we're their petri dish to roll out these racist policies that then are spread throughout the nation. So my community is my impact. When our mother lost her child because of any violence, when they don't have food on the table, when their house is caught on fire and they don't have renter's insurance, it's Black Lives Matter who I run to first, and also Harriet's Wildest Dreams. So those are my two organizations. Even 2 days ago, I need funeral support. Can we get funeral support? So living that is the impact. And these mothers, to hear the stories that they're going through and how they give back is such a totally different narrative from what we see. And so when we think about Black Lives Matter, I just want people to realize it's not just the violence at the police, but the violence at the state that our own taxpayers' dollars is playing against in the nation's capital, Chocolate City, the Blackest place in all of the country. So we are the impact. I see it every day, and my community and Cash App has don't IRS don't do that. And I'm sorry, not 10,000 US, but figure it out. IRS. You know, yeah, right.
Jamila, surprised by anything? Surprised by anything at all?
Not so much surprised because of how close I see everything that's happening involved, and also spending my time to be in support of Black Lives Matter. But I hope the community really, really takes the time to understand the work and how it impacts all of us and things in ways that you don't know, from grocery delivery, just everything, tenant organizing, support, rental support.
Yeah, and the work and the intentionality that goes into all of it.
Absolutely.
Afeni.
Yeah, so just like thinking about what April said, like one of the stories that really stuck with me in 2020 and made it like very apparent to me that I needed to stay in this movement and also organize in DC was, now I'm a military veteran, and I heard about how in 1919, there was a rumor, a lie, let's be clear, a lie that was spread through some like white army officers and other service members. And those same service members went down in the Southeast and were massacring Black people for like, what was it, 2-3 days? Until the National Guard had to come in and actually like stop it, like the president had to intervene. So as a veteran, I always think about that and think about how so much of what this country is built on is built on the suffering and the subjugation of Black people, right? So looking at the impact report, I didn't get, like everybody else said, we got that thing last night, y'all. It was 27 pages. All right.
We were a little late.
Nah, I had to go to sleep. Okay, I couldn't read the whole thing. But what I will say is the parts of it that I did see, I would say I'm not so shocked or surprised by any of this because all of the organizers out here, they poured into me. So I'm not surprised that I'm not even from DC. So if they're pouring resources, trainings, and all these things, I'm not surprised that an organization like Black Lives Matter DC is pouring all the support and everything into the community that they actually serve, that they're actually a part of. And I think it's really important that as organizers that we connect on that work, we talk, we share our work with each other, we share our texts with each other, and that we realize that a lot of this movement is not about our individual predilections. It's not about our individual attitudes, but it's about the building a sustainable support system for our communities to make sure that the oppression, the poverty that you're talking about is eradicated. Because we already know if we want to pull people out of, destitute situations, we give them resources, we give them education, we give them opportunities to do things outside of participating in underground economies that have been criminalized by the state. So, I'm just really grateful again to be here. I was really taken aback by some of the figures, of course, inside of the impact report. I wish I had $50,000, to throw around a little bit, you know what I'm saying? But the fact that they're able to do that and like actually serve and be sustainable in the community, I think that's just really important work. And
And last but not least, April, your thoughts, your takeaways on the impact report.
I'm looking at Mary Beth. I had a lot of thoughts. I was shocked. We tend to be in this work just working day in, day out, and you don't take in how much you did. But I will say also in that, I think there's been some, at least for me, some protection around how traumatic 2020 was.
Yes.
And so as we spoke, when you read this wonderful report, it's always been very clear for me all these years that we're able to do this because BLM has been home to a lot of people. 2020 was a year, 2020, 2021 was a year that, and we got some of our former folks in here that wouldn't have been possible at all. Wouldn't have been possible at all with them. And not just 2020, right? You have to build a kind of organization and relationship that allows you to be on the streets with each other and allows you to struggle behind the scenes. And so, yeah, I was shocked when I looked back and just said, we did a lot. I mean, there was a lot going on. There's a lot. We weren't doing the marches. We were doing East of the River. I mean, we did our stuff. But folks like Nene was in contact with families every day, all day, still is, which is awesome because that means all over the city. Kiana still had Life After Release and a million other things. But at the same time, when it came to this work, Kiki back there, Kiki, was everybody, 2021, we did a lot. And I think when you look, it can be defeating, and that's where history comes in. That's why you have to have a family here. We definitely made sure that we listed the names of everybody who's ever been in Black Lives Matter, because we wouldn't have this without them. There's no way. Every moment we built off relationships, we built off of things that we bonded over, good and bad. So yeah.
I want to piggyback on something you talked about that I think resonated with a lot of folks when you said trauma of the past several years. And I think about it as a reporter too, being oftentimes on the front lines, experiencing things. You have to reset. The family reunion, you said, is part of that, right? Recognizing and recharging yourself to go out and do this hard work. But when you were in the midst of it, how did you find that motivation? How did you find that peace to go back out on the street and do the necessary hard work day in and day out?
I would have to say it was probably our team at the time, right? Like, because we were together the whole time. And so, yeah, I mean, we're there. If they show up, they know they gotta come get me because I'm gonna be real late. And might be asleep, but they was there. They was there every day. And I knew if they could get up, and I went down there sometimes. I'm a little older now. So, but you got people like this out there. I moved to DC because I was interning within Cobra and fell in love with DC. So, and you know, Jamila was holding East of the River Mutual Aid down during the time. So when you can look and say people were still able to eat in our city because of the intentionality of BLM over the years, it kept me going. Because I mean, protest is one thing, right? But we got to feed the people so they can show up.
And there's power and comfort in the unity, I think, of DC.
Yeah.
And the inspiration that you get from other Black folks in the city. You know, I'll just say, when I grew up in Massachusetts, y'all, so you know. And when I came to DC in '99, that was the first time I had a Black supervisor. You know, that I saw Black folks in positions of power. So I had no interest to go back to Boston.
Colorado was,
You know, I went and came right back and have been here since '06. So there is inspiration in the average person in DC and the extraordinary. And you are among the extraordinary who are doing such great work. So the next question I'm going to pose right to my friend here in Kichi. What's the history of Black activism and resistance to state violence in the district? And what were some of the greatest challenges that the community and organizers had to overcome?
So let me just start off with this. Mommy, I want to go to Glen Echo. I want to go to Newbury Park, Mommy. I want to go. Take me to Newbury Park. This is in the early 60s. I couldn't understand why my mother would not let us go to the amusement park. Why couldn't we go to Glen Echo? Why couldn't we go? I didn't realize it was because it was segregated. We could not go because it was segregated. There was laws. It was a private facility, amusement park, but Black folk could not go. And when we talk about Black folk, when we talk about DC, we Native Washington is the DMV because there's not, you know, there was a lot of back and forth and all like that. So even though it was in Maryland, you know, that's where we would have gone. But there was resistance and there was a movement. And it was initiated by, I've got the name of the group, I got it here, because I'm just a little girl. The Nonviolent Action Group, which is called NAG, which was led by a Howard University student, a young religious student. And I bring that up because he was the brother who later became the person who was my mentor throughout the struggle, Mario Bedelli, his brother, Lawrence Henry. But this was during the 60s, organized students, organized people to tear down those laws. So like little girls like me could have some of our dreams come true with respect to that. And that was in the early 60s. Late 60s, there was, after the assassination of Martin Luther King, there was Resurrection City. And these were ordinary, average Black folk. My mama from the church were going down there to these tent cities that was established to try to go in and carry out those dreams of Martin Luther King or whatever. But I watched that as a young person. But what moved and grew me was Black Panther Party. Okay, you know what I'm talking about. You know. And right here in this city, I don't know if you all know the sister named Kinji Toure, who was a leader, you know, in the Panther Party. And I used to go around there all the time, and they had the the free health clinics and this organizing Black folk in the community. And she has been very, very instrumental on just about any and all issues dealing with women and rape crisis and all of those things. And so 1978, I mean, I'm just saying, Terrence Johnson. Again, we talk about DC, but we talk about PG County, which now is
Period.
Ward 9. Terrence Johnson was a 15-year-old young person who was defending himself against police brutality and killed 2 white police officers. And y'all know what happened. Ron Hampton, you know. And, you know, there was a huge, massive community response to the arrest and to the imprisonment of young 15-year-old Terrence Johnson. And most of it, a lot of it came from here in the DC community. He spent quite a number of years in prison, but it was a result of this community activism, this resistance to state power that allowed him to come home. I won't say what happened next after that because that's sad also. But in 1986, I'm not going to Operation Caribbean Cruise. I mean, you know, you all know Sister Dara Tompkins, who's very much within the Rastafarian community. It was this huge, failed, flawed effort by the DC Metropolitan Police Department to just try to round up people on just frivolous charges. And it really came back to browbeat them. Why? Because of organized resistance from the communities and stuff along those lines. So I just want to go and just conclude that it wasn't just state violence took many, many forms. The fact that we don't have statehood, that is the actual state violence. I got arrested in front of the Longworth House office, a building back then in the 90s when we were trying to just bring attention to our issues of non-statehood in this city. The DC, the fight against the DC death penalty in the early 1900s. I got to point out Ron Hampton again, because back then I didn't want to have nothing to do. I know we got policies about police. I didn't want to have nothing to do with any police. I'm telling you, I painted everybody with the same broad brush. But then I read Ron Hampton, who was a retired police officer, I think he retired, head of the National Black Police Association, and found out that there was ways in which there were people who thought like I thought, okay, and didn't just go with the So we were able to defeat that death penalty in the District of Columbia as a result of our union and collaboration. So, you know, there's more, but I just want to say the history of resistance is strong. Organizations, and COBRA has been part of that. Reparations movement is a response to state violence. You know, most of us don't know that there was the 1862 DC Compensated Emancipation Act, which gave reparations at the end of the enslavement period, not to Black folk, but gave reparations to the former white slaveholders for the loss of their so-called property. So we're still fighting against all of those things, you know.
It is so important. Round of applause for that historical brief. So important to know our history and to go down through the decades and see how it can still relate to today, what we've learned, how we've grown, and what challenges still exist. So Afeni, I want to pivot to you because you're on the ground doing the work. And you just heard that, you know, list going back several decades.
And the impact report goes, takes it back to the early, I just want to make sure.
Right.
And folks look at that impact report for all the stuff that happened long before I was born. So go on.
What connection do you see between, you know, what folks did in the past and what you're doing now on the ground?
I think that we are standing on the shoulders of our ancestors that started this movement. We're not doing anything new. And I think a lot of organizers that are a part of like this new iteration after the George Floyd uprising, we're very aware of that. We're reading our history of movement. We're actually studying, you know, how movements succeeded and failed. And being somebody who's on the ground now, especially after 2020, because there was a lot of trauma that came with being a 2020 arrests, you know, and I don't think people really fully understand that we were outside, I would say for like 160 to 70 days straight, every single day, 7 days a week. And then overall, we protested for 200 days, well over 200 days, all the way up until, you know, January 6th and everything else. Like we were still outside, even a week after that. we were still outside talking about these things, talking about the effects of white supremacy on our country. And especially after something like January 6th, when I feel like it was, I'm like, clearly we always knew Trump won until 2016, like the white people started cutting up, you know, but I think to see Confederate flags and Nazi flags, all that stuff in the capital of this country, in the Capitol building, I think it just reinforced what we already knew, which was that Black Lives Matter is not allowed in that capital, but white supremacy, the Confederacy, has always lived there. And they will continue to live there because that is what they're legislating. They're legislating white supremacy into our lives, into our policy, into our financial systems every single day. So I look now, and of course you look at leadership, like there is Black leadership in DC. And you know, I'm a little far to the left than some of my comrades here on this panel now, so I'm gonna be honest.
Everyone's on the record. Remember that. You are on the record.
And anything I can say about Muriel, I probably said to her face. So
Yeah.
there is Black leadership in DC, but again, oppression in Blackface is still oppression, especially considering if there is, you know, DC has the highest homeless rate per capita of any city in this country. And even though we're not a state, DC is nestled in the richest state in the richest country in the world now. So it's not like we don't have the resources to properly support these communities. It's the fact that they're just not doing it. So I, as somebody who's on the ground now, I think that I'm definitely more into the militant organizing. I think that while, yes, we should be fighting in the policy space, I think that policy is important. Clearly, all the poverty is a policy choice. So if we're gonna, unless we're just gonna overthrow the government, which I'm totally with. If we're not gonna do that though, we have to be able to stand on our principles and stand up and say like, no, we want to reallocate funds on police, not because we don't believe in public safety, but because we know that public safety isn't just centered around the police. Public safety is centered around education, food, housing. Education is centered around just resources and upward and accessible upward mobility. So you can't tell people all day that you can move up, but if you cutting off their feet, pulling up the ladder, burning the bridge and everything else for them to be able to get there, then turning around and blaming them for their own circumstances, I have a problem with that. So I don't know, like I feel like on the ground now, a lot of us are, I feel like some of us are scrambling. Like, let's be honest, like we're not really sure where to go. I know I'm not speaking for myself. We can say that we can feel the heat turning up in this country and something's about to happen. And I think that the more we spend time fighting amongst ourselves versus actually figuring out what we're going to do moving forward, is that we're going to lose, you know? And this is the last thing I'm going to say, but I have been watching this lecture that Kwame Ture gave on unity, and I just played it in a volunteer meeting that we had with Life After Release. And something that he said over and over again is that unity is not about being against the same thing. It's about being for the same thing.
Say that again.
Like, no, for real. Like it's about like, okay, like we know what we want to destroy, but what are we actually all on board for building? And I think that a lot of us in this movement space, we're in a capitalist society. We get caught up in the branding, we get caught up in all that stuff. And it does not matter whose brand was on the front of the revolution, y'all. I promise you, the revolution will not be televised. Okay. So like, I don't know. I think we are trying to create a path for leadership that is not just centered around egos. We're trying to create a path for leadership that is not just centered around capital, but that is centered around real community and like building a sustainable, safe space for everybody that exists in that community.
Yes.
So yeah.
Do you feel that there is a little too much division amongst the activist groups in DC?
Absolutely. And it's not even just, honestly, I'm more of a, like, anybody who knows me knows like I'm very like global and like internationalist in my politics. So I don't think it's just within DC. There's a divide amongst groups all over the globe, or like as far as like what being on the left actually means, what liberation actually looks like we cannot seem to get on the same page. And it's just really frustrating because while we're doing all this fighting and arguing amongst ourselves, they over there winning, legislating, they moving, they organizing, okay? And they in a range, by the way, where we not. So yeah, like I think that the amount of division, the lack of accountability, the lack of actual honesty and radical, like we always say love and rigor, but there's no rigor. There's always just love. Like, oh, well, we love you, so we're gonna let you keep doing all these terrible things you're doing. But there's no rigor around. We are abolitionists, and abolitionists is personal transformation as well as societal transformation. I cannot say I want to live in an abolitionist world and say that I'm about to give, any of these. I love my young Black men so much. My brother, he's crazy though. I'm not giving him a gun to defend us on the front lines. I can't trust you. I can't trust you to go into whatever new society that we do have and keep the rest of us safe. I can't trust you right now. And not say that can never happen, but it's to say that at this point we have to have more rigor around what it looks like to hold people accountable to personal transformation in order for the movement to move forward.
Round of applause for that, please. Jamila, I want to pivot to you as a policymaker, as a politician, not a policymaker. She's like, no, I'm not going to claim that. Don't give that to me. But as a politician, what do you see as your role in the fight for Black liberation, and what should we be focused on, what legislatively, in order to support your endeavors?
Yeah, no, I've been really moved by what everyone said, and I want to piggyback off of something that Afeni said, where it starts with you. Personal transformation starts with yourself. And I had to go through the process of decolonizing myself, and I had the pleasure and the liberty of doing that in Africa for 10 years. I had the pleasure to see what Black community can look like pre-colonial history, learning about our religion from real, what is real and not what was socialized. And I think the biggest work we have to do is make that change for ourselves, because until we change ourselves, we're not going to be able to change anything else. And something that, like, we all need to remember, this is by design. This is by design. Race is a social construct. It is not biological. It is all man-made, and it was man-made by Europeans for the colonization and control of resources and people to uphold the white European culture. And that's something we have to realize. And racism is intersectional because it holds different forms of oppression, from patriarchy to heteronormalcy. It's all of these different types of intersectional oppressions that hold us down. And something we need to realize with enslavement particularly, Willie Lynch wrote a book on how to make a slave. And one thing that stands out to me so much is that it only takes 4 generations, because all you have to do is break their mind. Because by the 4th generation, they will hate each other and worship their master, to think, thank you, master, for having me here and out of that savage beast land so I can worship and serve you. And that has been transferred down as generational trauma. And science shows us that genetics, that trauma changes your DNA. And what do you pass down? DNA is genetic. You pass that down to your children. So what we have in this country, in the city, is that some people are passing down generational wealth, and we are passing down generational trauma and generational poverty. And remember, poverty is trauma. Poverty is violence. The CDC has told us the #1 threat to public health and safety is poverty. And in this city, the 7th richest city in the world, we have majority of the power and the wealth concentrated on one half of the river, and majority of the poverty concentrated on the other half of the river. That has resulted in white people having 81% times, not 81 times, but 81% times the wealth of Black people in the 7th richest city in the world. How do you have a city that has the highest per capita Black homeowners, but also the highest racial wealth gap? How do you have a city where Black people are concentrated with no goddamn grocery store? But for 80,000 people, you got one raggedy grocery store with no fresh foods. How does that happen? It happens through policy. It happens through decisions that people make. It doesn't happen naturally. God is not forcing us to do this. We have the tools, and we know that it can be done, because when the pandemic happened and people didn't go to work, guess what? The world kept moving. Ain't shit blow up. Ain't
found
shit
out.
happened. We realized that nothing happened, but it comes through because of this scarcity mentality that has been used to tell us that in order for somebody else, for us to have, someone else can't have. And we know it's a lot when this country throws away 40% of the food every year. How do you have 1 in 5 children? Most of those are Black and Latino children going hungry, but then 40% of food is thrown away a year. How does that happen? How do you have a city where there's so much wealth and resources, the 7th richest in the world, and we one of the smallest cities in the world? How does that happen? It happens through racism. And one thing I want to remind people is racism is a system. You don't have to be a color, ethnicity, a gender, a race, a damn dog to hold up racism. It is a system of oppression, and it happens by the people that's there. But you know what? It's people who make a system. It's people who changes that system. And we, the people, have the responsibility, the opportunity to overthrow this system and to live within the systems that we deserve. The systems that Adrienne Marie Brown tells us that we are living in someone else's imagination. I call it a damn nightmare.
Yes.
And we have the power to reimagine the systems that we want to live in, the communities that we want to live in. What does protection look like? What does restoration look like? What does accountability looks like? What does abolition looks like? And if you can't do it in DC, I tell you all, we won't do it anywhere in this country, because there's nowhere in this country where there is a Black majority like there is in DC. And if we don't do it here, it will not be realized throughout the rest of the country. So what does that mean for us right now? DC has a $19 billion budget, y'all. 19 billion with a B is only 700,000 residents, 370,000 Black people. Let's call for every Black person to have guaranteed income. What can we call? Let's call for DC to actually put in a reparations program. You got white cities across the country in Salt Lake, Utah, looking at reparations, and the nation's capital can't look at a reparations program.
They're gonna give it to the cops.
Right.
And speaking of, right? And speaking about that, we got to look at DC, we know it's a tale of two cities, but it has to be said, it's not just this disparity we see between Black and white, it's native Black Washingtonians. Because 96% of people in DC jail are native Black Washingtonians. So it's the stigma, it's the discrimination against native Black Washingtonians, an attempt to erase and displace us. Why? Because that's where the power and the movement started. So if you can erase them, you can remove them. People don't have that history. They don't have that connection to the land. So we have to fight. Trans fans have to fight. Black people that are middle income, give that bougie shit up and fight.
That's all my name.
Like I am telling you, bougie Black people, wonderful for you, but guess what? You ain't made shit. You haven't. Because it's all a part of this system to divide and control, to take a few, let a few be palpable so we can control everyone else. We have to use the power and the resources we have, because until all of us are free, none of us are free. So think about it, get involved in this budget process, $19 billion. We will not see another budget like this for a long time. It's a 2-year budget, all that federal money. Understand what's happening with the revised criminal code and the attacks that are happening from our Black sister who wrote that code and is trying to say that, oh, dark money funded it, dark money, all of this. And look at the mayor's comeback plans. I don't know where we're coming back from, but that's another story. But look at this comeback plan. One thing I want to point out is there's an initiative to draw on 100,000 new DC residents. I don't know if y'all remember, but about 20 years ago, there was an initiative to draw in 4,000 new DC residents. And what happened? We may have brought in 4,000, but we lost 200,000 Black people almost, because there was not a racial equity and a racial justice lens. So we have to hold all of our administration leadership responsible for bringing in new without displacing and hurting and harming. Because I want to see out of those 100,000, our brothers and sisters who were displaced to come back. How do we bring them back? How do we bring people's children back who can't afford to no longer live in this city? So you pay attention to this comeback plan, this racial equity plan that has just been released, the $19 billion budget, and the revised criminal code.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll also add $19 billion budget, and many of our schools, most east of the river,
Are
are
being cut.
facing deep cuts.
With more
My kids go to Ann Beers, and we were just looking at an assistant principal, an intervention coach, a specialist, special education coordinator, 6 positions that are on the chopping block.
but they want to bring
Yeah.
SROs back.
Yet they believe that is enough money for a functioning school when most of our children are in communities where they need the love and that support of a school community. And the majority of our kids east of the river travel west of the river to go to school. We have the most kids in Ward 7 and 8. Why are they leaving and traveling an hour to get to school? So we all need to lean in and be engaged. Thank you, Jamila, for that. We are nearing the end, y'all. And we want to leave a little time for Q&A because I can tell y'all have some questions, right? Okay, so we're going to get into our last question for the panel, and then we will open up to Q&As. So the last question: what is the vision for the city? I want you to put your dreamer cap on. What is your vision for the city? And complete this statement, and I'll start with Nkechi. I dream of a city that.
Okay, so I'm gonna follow my notes, so I know we're getting to that. So my vision for the city. I dream of a city that strives for the spirituality, humanity, and genius of Black people, and in our new pursuit of these values. I dream of a city that believes in the family and the community, and in the community as a family, and I will work to make that concept live. I dream of a city where the community is more important than the individual. I dream of a city where we truly love our brothers and sisters as ourselves. I dream of a city that is not beholden to the whims and the wishes of Congress, one where its residents are autonomous and self-determining. A city where affordable housing, healthcare, affirming education abounds. A city where police misconduct and killings and prosecutorial abuse is eradicated and accountability is the norm, with the goal towards policing and prison abolition. And I dream of a city that will one day, once again, be a chocolate city, but one in which all of my dreams for peace, prosperity, self-determination, and joy come true.
Beautiful. Thank you. Round of applause for that. Yes. Jamila, I dream of a city that.
That's so beautiful. But one of the things I love about Black Panthers, it shows you what we can be. Like seeing a Wakanda in real life on screen. I dream, and when I talk to the youth, they talk about how do we have a Ward 8 Conda? How do we dream of a Ward 8? When you cross the bridge, you don't lose any years of your life, but you walk into spirituality, you walk into your ancestors, you can smell the food, you can hear the go-go, you can see everything, and you have what you need. You can live, you can walk, you can work in our community, and the only reason you need to leave is because you want to, not because you got to access everything. I dream of a city where our youth live to 15. I dream of a city where my brother can live to 50 and not 40. I dream of a city where we hold each other accountable and we see each other as people, where everyone's needs are met, and beyond that, we know that there is abundance. Our God told us that there is abundance here, and I dream and I know we'll see that abundance.
Yes.
Feeney, I dream of a city that.
I dream of a city that has culturally responsive education in our schools. As somebody who grew up in a neighborhood that I had band, cheerleading, fashion club, anything I wanted to do. I dream of a city that has a real opportunity for self-determination for Black youth, whether that's through arts, whether that's through whatever, that isn't a charter school, that they can get publicly and readily available, and they don't have to travel an hour for it. I dream of a city where we don't have to have 40 plus police departments all around this motherfucker, while they still tell us that we need more police. That's crazy to me. I dream of a city where public safety is predicated on compassion, where it is what is predicated on in prevention and not just in a reaction to violence. I dream of a city where we see the humanity in every single Black person, trans person, queer person in this city. I dream of a city where, that has effective and clean public transportation that runs 24 hours. You know what I'm saying? And I dream of a city where there is Black leadership that is actually rooted in Black radical tradition.
Yeah.
Like Black people that don't support white supremacy through their policies. You know what I'm saying? So, these are my freedom dreams. These are the things that I know that are possible. because we're sitting in this room and we're even having these conversations. And that's where this all started. So, yeah.
In April, finish us up with I dream of a city that.
I dream of a city that believes that and embodies people's assembly, right? And I say that because I believe that, I look out and I think about this all the time. Why DC doesn't get in the streets when somebody here is killed. And then I'm looking at all the families and I'm looking at my comrades and remembering being on those scenes a lot of times before the families got there, right? I've seen way too many families have to learn what happened. That people will be empowered enough, new people, right? I'm so excited. We invited Janetta and Mari just these last few weeks, folks who are brand new, haven't been in movement, people that have different views and experiences that is really going to change the way that we move forward, right? Because we're empowering people. I think that's one of the things that I learned over these last 2 years was the desperate need for new folks, the desperate need for all of us to be rooted in political education, right? And that political education only happens when you do it with other people. And that once you empower people with the skills, it shouldn't be just a few of us, that people have the organizing and mutual aid skills, that when stuff does happen, people know how to get up in the streets. Yeah. And we're all like no move. And we have the power to demand the things that we need or take what we need.
Y'all give it up for this panel. Now, I promised a Q&A. I do have the mic, so I'm gonna walk around and ask if anyone has a question. We have about 15 minutes and then we'll do a quick wrap. You would have the first question all the way in the back. Come on.
Hi, I'm Jeff Kennedy. I used to be the CEO of the Rebecca Project for Justice for a long time. I'm a native Washington, McKinley and Blue High Schools. So let me say this first, because I just want to correct something that was very minor, but I think very important. Athena, in 1919, it was the Black troops who came back from World War I who stopped the rioting in Washington, D.C. They started putting bullet holes in folks. And it sent shockwaves around the world that Black folks stood up for themselves. And it was these World War I veterans that stopped Red Summer in Washington, D.C. So I need to make that very clear. It wasn't no president. It was the Black folks. And so the statement about white oppression and blackface, that's exactly what we have right here in Washington, D.C. A bunch of people of color.
Right, because they don't like to be called Black.
Because we're confusing what Black is. Of people of color who are practicing white supremacy in your budget,
every day,
in your school budgets. That's why you're losing so much money east of the river. And when you interviewed me 2 years ago, I sat there and said, oh, these folks is practicing eugenics on Black folks. And I went all around the world from London to all places in Europe saying the same thing. They say, well, why are they doing that in Washington, D.C.? I said, I don't know. I told April about it when we first met, 13 years ago, down Martin Luther King Library. And I haven't had to say anything different because that's exactly what it is. Putting white supremacy in the budget of the District of Columbia. I mean, these are Black folks. So if you go to South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, they have all apologized and given compensation for South Carolina.
We're a little tight on time.
For eugenics. So let me say it. Thank you, Jamila. I met you at Ron Bogus event. Let me just say that. And so the question is, what are we going to do different than what we've already done in the last few years?
Yeah.
What are we gonna do different, y'all?
Stop voting for Muriel. I'm being dead serious. Stop voting for her.
Number one.
Stop voting for her.
Stop canvassing for her.
Hold.
Look.
I did not. Okay.
You know,
Yeah, I think that's one of the things, is just say stop, just say no. Like, we don't have to keep talking about some of these things. We don't have to keep meeting. Stop meeting about how we're gonna act. Like, that's a whole meeting and planning that we could have been in the street, right? Let's learn how to take action. Let's learn together about what we need to take action for, and just no more meetings about meetings and planning action. It's like meetings have become action.
All right, one more question. Just say your name and.
This Kevin, I'm so sorry. How do you plan to fix the divide between middle and upper class Black people and then lower poverty? Because I'm middle and upper class Black people. My father is making 100K. My family is making 100K. So they don't see this at all. They don't experience it. They don't feel it. They don't feel it, because we're talking about Black people who are basically, in a sense, out of touch because they have. And when you have Black people like that who are out of touch because they have, like what you said to your point, it's like you have the middle class, upper class, where I was also a military brat, where you are with Asian, white, Native American kids on a military base. So in that aspect, all of us had a basketball court in the front yard and a trampoline in the back. And that I'm talking about houses were like that every end. So until I moved up the base, I didn't experience racism. I didn't know what it was exactly. You get what I'm saying? In my perspective, in my experience. So how can you fix that divide and bring them together in order to move it? Because until you have them and us, because we are all Black people at the end of the day, you can't move forward because
We're short on time. How do we, for those who have trampolines in the backyard? My kids are dying for a trampoline.
I've never even seen a trampoline.
And we showed you too.
Okay, y'all. Okay, that was a thoughtful question. No, that was a great question. I just, gotta tighten it up. I have a deadline.
I'll start.
Answer.
I'll be 30 seconds and pop it over. One of the things I want us to realize is us, and it's not what I can do to fix, what Nene can do to fix, what April can do to fix, because we're not saviors. Right. We are not. And that means that's dropping parachute shit. That's not real. So it's about us taking our responsibility to do it. And I'm going to tell you the truth. And this is just a challenge. Any Black person who says that has worked in the workforce has experienced racism, because that's why you got your DEI offices. That's why you ensued your EEO. Oh shit, I've been fired. I'm the da-da-da-da. So you know that racism exists because you feel it and you experience it, and you got your Black affinity group. You got at work, you got your women's affinity. Let's be real. I made 6 figures at one point before we started a cooperative. I ain't 6 figures no more, but we all knew what it was. And when you were in those spaces, that's when courage happens. When you're in those spaces, when you're in a space to stand up at $1 billion organization and say, your ass is racist. And I'm gonna say this on Harriet and everything she gave me. And then you call your mama and tell your mama I made the white CFO cry at $1 billion organization.
Sorry.
And you stand in that shit. And you know that, yes, I'm gonna get fired. Yes, I'm gonna be blackballed. But at the end of the day, I'm Black, so kiss my Black ass, because I will sue you when you do it. And it's about when you take your individual responsibility, because white supremacy is about, the core of it is to dehumanize. How do you dehumanize? You control, you separate. And that's how, and you hold them in fear. And until we say we would no longer be controlled, we would no longer be separated from our other Black people, because when we're separate from them, we're closer to who? To whiteness. And we are saying that white is right when we're closer to that. And it's about us taking that power, responsibility in ourselves. And it's about Black people going back to their families, just like we tell these white people, go back to your families in the Midwest, but going back to our families and bringing up these issues, because most Black people are 1 or 2 paychecks away from anybody else. How many Black people don't have somebody who's lower income, who lives in the hood, who's dealing with mental health challenges, who uses substances to try to deal with the violence we experience? It's very, very few of us who are removed from that. I mean, maybe 1% of us who are actually removed from that. So it's about, what can we do? It's the unity, it's the us. What can we do? You can also support Black Lives Matter and other organizations if you're not ready to confront your family. We go talk to them for you.
Right. We do have to wrap it up. These amazing ladies will be here to answer any questions, but it's about real unity. It's about the courage to stand up, and the love for each other. And stop having these daggone meetings and just act. All right, just act, do something, do
Right.
something. Thank you so much. Let's give it up to our esteemed panel.
I have something here. About a new business.
I'm gonna give it over to April to wrap things up, but this was such an amazing afternoon, and I feel the energy, and hopefully y'all were inspired to go home to your communities and spread the word, and do some more work on yourselves and on your neighbors and in your neighborhood. You know, we have a powerful legacy here in DC, and if you just take a look through the pages of this amazing impact report, you see the work that these folks are doing day in and day out, the work that's going unnoticed. So thank you for everyone here and your insights and wonderful words of wisdom that you've shared with all of us. Give it up one more time, and then April will wrap it up.
Thank you, Ms. Moderator.
Oh, yeah, I have a mic right here. Yep, okay, so I just wanted to thank everybody. One of the things we wanted to make sure that folks did is understand the difference between BLM DC and BLM, the organization. That is the last part of your impact report. So please read the impact report. I believe I'm supposed to say something about what's happening next.
And then ask.
Oh, yeah. Man, because of what's happening nationally, chapters, we raise our own money. We left the network, but we don't get money from National Black Lives Matter. Why we're doing a fundraiser. So I challenge each one of y'all, donate. Tell the larger community to donate. Currently, we have a fundraiser online. If you go back to the registration, where BLMDCFamilyReunion.com, we currently have like $600. So we need y'all to bring it together as a community so we can continue to do the things that we do. Yes. Yes. Right.
Please go into the crystal room and make a gift. We wanted you all to have this amazing experience, but we can't do it without you in the streets and in a bank account. So, and if you know a friend, if you say I ain't got it, but you can call somebody else to give it, please do that.
Email.
Leverage your resources.
Post.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah,
Thank
Y'all know I'm a data person.
Good job.